Welcome to Lead with Hope with Brandy Kelly, the podcast where we explore the power of hope, leadership, and resilience in today's world. Each week, we'll bring you stories, insights, and actionable advice from leaders, innovators, and change makers. So let's dive in and discover how you can lead with hope.
Good morning, everyone, and I am here today with Marty Silverman. Marty is a father, a grandfather, a husband, and he is a longtime educator in beautiful San Antonio, Texas, where I just recently visited, and I would totally agree it's a beautiful place. Marty has been committed to providing the best educational experience for students and families at Salinas Elementary School, where he is recently retired as principal. Martin has worked as a teacher and administrator in urban, suburban, and rural districts, and his interests include creating and nurturing school culture, providing enriching experiences for students and families, and developing future teachers and administrators. Welcome to the podcast, Marty.
Brandy, thank you so much for having me. And, you know, we're talking about beautiful San Antonio. So we're recording, it is December 30th. And we are expected to have a very unusual day. It's supposed to be in the mid 80s today.
Wow.
We're waiting for our cold blast, which is predicted to come, in the next couple of weeks. But for today, it's going to be shorts weather. So unusual even for us this late in the year. But beautiful San Antonio never disappoints if you want weather.
Yeah, I was there in the fall of the year, and my husband and I got to experience the San Antonio Riverwalk. The restaurants there are amazing, and I totally agree. It is a beautiful place to visit, and I'm sure it's a beautiful place to live, Marty.
Yeah, and both of us, my wife's a Midwesterner like you. She's from Iowa, and I'm from New York originally, from New York City, from Brooklyn, and so. Having made our lives here has been interesting. It's been, it was a culture thing. And then my kids were all born here. My grandkids all born here. So it's become definitely home.
Absolutely. So that's a beautiful segue into you sharing your story. Tell us, how did you end up in San Antonio? Why did you become an educator? What can you tell us about Marty Silverman?
So I'm going to start from the very, very beginning. And so the family legend says, I have three older sisters. I grew up in Brooklyn and with three older sisters who used to play school. And the family legend is that my crib was the principal's office when they played school. So I always feel like it was kind of imprinted on me, even though I didn't maybe know it at the time, that education was imprinted on me. And, I grew up, my parents were first generation here in America. All four of my grandparents came immigrated from Europe. And my parents were, my dad, didn't graduate high school. My mom did graduate high school. My dad worked in a factory and in the garment district in New York. And so education became kind of like public education was exactly what it was intended to be for me and my family. It was, to show you a better life or a different life, which turned out to be a better life. And so I embraced education. Luckily, I embraced it. And having parents who, didn't have a lot of formal education, but who were real smart and, were readers and encouraged it, made a big difference. One of the things about me was we lived in a housing project from when I was born until I was 7. My parents had actually lived there before I was born. And I was in the first group ever to go through Head Start. So when Head Start started back in the mid 60s, I was 4 years old that first year and went to Head Start. So Head Start and pre-K in the New York City public schools. And so, like how it was meant to be is kind of how it came out. But I went to college in upstate New York, a town called Oswego, New York. And in for my undergraduate. And I was not an education major. I hadn't really intended to necessarily go and become a teacher, but something I was, I went as an undeclared major. I became a communications major, a speech communications major. And then I had this kind of epiphany year, and it was like, I'm going to change my major to education. It was like a real sudden, and I never regretted it. But in those days, in the mid 80s in New York, there were not a lot of jobs for teachers. And so I took an opportunity to become a teacher in Houston, Texas. I taught there for 3 years and then moved to San Antonio and have been here ever since. So I was a teacher for 7 years, an elementary teacher, first grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. And I was a bilingual teacher for a year. And then I was in administration for 33 years, and I retired after 40 years in Texas public ed in June of 23.
Wow, that is an amazing, amazing accomplishment. And, you and I have something in common that I didn't even know about before we started recording this episode. But my mom and dad were both high school dropouts. So my dad dropped out. He dropped out somewhere between 8th and 9th grade, and he went to work in the family business, which was logging. They harvested trees. Many generations of my family did that. And then my mom, as a junior in high school, dropped out of school, which is mind-boggling to me. But the funny thing about it is, I think despite the fact they dropped out, they were such hard workers, and the values they instilled in me, and it sounds like the values your parents instilled in you, created the trajectory of our lives and kind of shaped the people that we would eventually become and the educators that we would become as well. So as I think about that, it kind of leads me to the next question. I believe that hope is necessary in our lives, and it's not just wishful thinking. It has to involve actions. So what actions or habits did you engage in to make that reality come true?
That's a great question, Brandy, because I think initially what you just said about the kind of the stage that was set by our families made a big, like there was a great positivity in growing up, knowing that opportunities existed. And the thing about that is, I grew up in the big city, right, in Brooklyn, where things are available to you, and even more then, every different type of person, every different type of job you could do, we were surrounded by all of that all the time. And so all of that became a possibility. And I think probably the biggest, it's not even an incident, but just like the whole idea that things were possible to you. There were ways for you to do something differently than people around you were doing, because people around you were doing different things, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so having had that model of, it almost sounds trite, like you can be anything, but there was a thought that you could be anything. You could be anything that you wanted to be. And that education was the key to that. At that time, if you wanted to be upwardly mobile, if you wanted to be artistic, if you wanted to be, in some kind of physical thing, education helped you get there. And so I believe that having grown up with a sense of anything's possible, and I will tell you too, being the youngest and the only boy in the family, it was that's a great place to be to be in a family, because you really do have every opportunity is available to you.
Yeah,
which is really nice.
Ironically, Marty, I am the only and the oldest daughter.
And you know what? And I married an oldest and only daughter.
Yeah. And I do highly recommend that, because I married an oldest son of 2 and 2 boys. And oh my goodness, we have been married for 30 years now. And the first the first third of our marriage, we butted heads like you would not believe, because we were both the oldest and accustomed to being in charge.
Right. And I had to learn that having been the prince,
Right, right.
in the family was not going to fly necessarily with the oldest daughter, who had
No.
already had that deal with her two younger brothers.
Yeah, that's so funny. And it's interesting though. That's part of who we are and how we change and evolve. And it helps us in terms of creating the kind of person that we want to be. And I think it does shape our mindset as well. And with the Lead with Hope framework, we talked about a little bit about habits, but with optimistic outlook, thinking about your childhood, thinking about your marriage years, how has that evolved over time, having that mindset?
I love that that's part of the acronym, because I think that's the thing that gets squashed out quickly in people. You being an adult, when you're young, you want to be an adult because you think adults, like I remember being in college, even thinking, I can't wait to get out and, start making money and, whatever, and having this life. And you go back to thinking, dang, I had it great, when I was living in a dorm, living in an apartment in college, with friends, and didn't have the worries of adult life. I was kind of living sort of a life that was free. I was, miles away from my family, and I was making my own decisions, and, there were no cell phones. And so it wasn't like people were tracking you every minute, but it was, but I think that it's really easy to become an adult and then start feeling the pressures and the stressors of like life, bills and decisions and family and, kids and all those kinds of things. And I think that goes in our work too. And what I found was, as a teacher, I found this out really quickly, actually. I was lucky that I found it out quickly, was that if we maintain our, like, what the positives are, if we start framing things from the positive. And so I'll give you an example. You as a superintendent, me as a principal, a longtime principal, we would get, say, our test results, right? Our state testing results. And what I noticed that a lot of colleagues would do is, the first thing, and I did it myself too, the first thing you did was look at where your deficiencies were. Where did we not do well? Where did, who didn't, who are the kids that didn't do well? And what I started consciously doing was reframing that into, like, okay, yes, we have challenges and we're going to address those, but like, what have we done well? What did we grow in? What did we do well in? And when you start, it's really easy to find all the bad stuff. And people will point it out to you quickly. Also, but like, if you start framing your own thinking in what we're doing well, and let's build on what we're doing well, pulling everything up rather than pushing from the bottom, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in the culture of the school, when I was a principal, and in your life as well. So I feel like that's probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
Was that if you consciously start looking at what's great, and you start living in what's great.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, starting out in education as a school social worker, that really helped me, because I was trained in a strengths-based perspective, a solution-focused model, right? And that's how I started in talking with kids and with parents and with administrators and teachers, as we were looking for solutions to whatever it was that we were trying to solve for in the school environment. But as I think back over my career, I think we can all do some things better. So if you were to think back over your career, now that you're retired, what would you tell your first year self?
My first year self as a teacher would be, stop taking all these things so seriously and personally, right? I just did a talk the other day, a couple of weeks ago, to a group of caseworkers for childcare, the people who go to get help with childcare, right? Okay. And so these were the caseworkers that were working with the families that were were doing that. And one of the things in the talk that I didn't make this up. Somebody gave this to me, and I gave them each a Q-tip, and the Q-tip stood for quit taking it personally. And I think that was, I loved how that connected with me, because a lot of what happened, and it took me a little bit to figure it out, was that, everybody is doing the best that they can. And sometimes the best that they can is not the way that I would do it. And sometimes it comes out in a way that's not, socially okay. People get angry and they yell and they don't always act the way that they're supposed to act. But it's not typically meant to me personally. Right. And so quit taking it personally, a Q-tip. It is, I feel like is a big lesson for all of us. And so I would tell myself, certainly as a new principal, because I went in, guns blazing at age 31, believing, that I knew it all and I was going to make everything happen. And then I learned that it was, I needed to take the perspective of other people more into consideration. As a teacher, the lesson that I got on that was, I started teaching in 1983. I was a first grade teacher in Houston. And this was before we had class size limits. It was before we had, conference periods. We had no off periods, and we ate lunch with our kids. There was no duty free lunch, those first couple of years. Yeah. And also I had 31 kids my first year and 34 my second year in first grade. So it was like, but that's how it was. So it didn't seem weird because that's how it was. But I remember about 6 to 8 weeks after I started, somebody from the district had come while we were at lunch. And I walk in the room with my 31 kids, and they're standing there with a clipboard, and they're saying, "All right, Mr. Silverman, there are several things wrong with your room. Let's start here and work our way around." And while it could have been soul crushing, it actually was funny to me, ultimately, because I was thinking, here are these 31 little people that I have grown to love already, and I'm doing my best to try to make, have a good experience in first grade. And the things that the person was telling me were all visual. It was all, how my letters looked on the board and, about a bulletin board and things like that. And I started thinking, okay, which of us has our mind in the right spot? And that really helped. So I would definitely tell myself, and it wasn't personal to me. And so, like I said, quit taking it personally has been a big lesson for me.
Yeah, I think that would be one that could be applied almost universally, because as I think back over my career, if I would not care so much what other people think, if I would, in the past, not take those things personally, that would free you up so much just to do the right thing, to show up for kids and to do the right thing for kids. So that's powerful advice. And I think that is spot on for educators today. So as now you're in retirement, tell us about your purpose now and your passions. What are you working on?
Well, and so, it's funny because our careers are a big part of our identity. When I retired, one of the things that I felt was that I've always had this identity. And when I say always, for 40 years, I had this identity as an educator that was, in schools. And then all of a sudden I wasn't that. And now I was a former principal, a former teacher. And it took a minute to digest that one of your main identities is gone. But I will tell you that the lesson of, and this is not a bad thing, when I put in my retirement, it was the Thursday before the day before spring break of 23, right? So, it was Thursday, and then Friday we had school, and then it was spring break. And on Friday morning, my job was posted, right? And so I was okay with that, because it occurred to me that the organization and me were two separate entities, that, my self was completely different and unrelated necessarily to the organization. The organization's needs and my needs were were different. They had to fill my position. I didn't expect them to leave, a shrine, my office as a shrine. It had to go on. And so I was fine with that. I was fine with it. But it also made me understand that, yeah, that's what happens. Organizations continue and your lives continue. And so, one of the things that I would say, the first thing that is in retirement is I have this big family. I have 3 kids and I have 6 grandkids and 1 getting ready to come beginning of February, end of January, beginning of February. And the oldest, they're all preschool age. The oldest is 5. He just turned 5 in November. And so we have a lot of little kids to attend to. And they all live here in town. And so, a lot of little kids to attend to. And so that is primary. But also, after 40 years, you don't just stop caring about education and doing things. So definitely writing. I've been doing some consulting, some presenting, and I enjoy all those opportunities. I've also had the opportunity to present to groups that are not like public school district people. I've done Head Starts and that group that I was telling you about that I just presented to, the caseworkers. Those opportunities are fun because you get to bring the same type of culture talk to people who don't necessarily get that on a regular basis. So that's pretty much how I've been keeping a little bit fresh in this in education. Plus having kids who are getting ready to start school, grandkids who are getting ready to start school. It's important to me. It's important that they have a great experience.
Yeah, and as an early educator, so I was a principal at a pre-K through first grade building, had almost 400 kids under the age of 7.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, those educators are the hardest working teachers and TAs and, whatever your role is in that organization. It's amazing to me what they can do. They bring kids in who maybe have had no school experience, and within a couple of months, they're walking in straight lines and they're following the norms that are established in that school or district. And it's amazing to me.
Brandy, I have to piggyback on that because that is my passion with education too, is early childhood. My first principalship was a pre-K. It was pre-K 2 and then it became pre-K 3. It was the gravity of how important that is. It's funny because in society, we trivialize early childhood, I believe. And I think that we miss the mark on that because kids come into us typically like excited. They want to learn. They want to, they want to do, they're curious. They're, for the most part, it's, and then we have to shape that into a path that we can sometimes have an issue like, I used to say, and it was ironic, it was not funny, but I was like, send us your excited, curious kids and we'll beat it out of them, right? We'll make them hate this process by putting so many layers of like trivia onto them, about how learning happens. But really, the investment, if you start kids out with that optimism and with the positivity and wanting to be in school, it goes such a long way. And so now, to transition that's how I also feel about the staff, because one of our big, so it's easier to do with kids than it is with adults, but my leadership philosophy was the same thing. Like, people come to work and we can make them love it here or hate it here.
Right.
And we control that as administrators, because one of the things with administration is, we say all the time, and I speak this all the time, is, we're here for the kids. We're doing it all for the kids, but really we're not doing it all for the kids. Our job, your job and my job were not kids. It was adults. It was so the adults could take care of the kids, right? Yep. We wanted the adults to do the right thing for the kids because we didn't have direct interaction with all the kids every day. Yeah. And so it became important to me to make sure that the adults had that same experience, like that if they came to work, they didn't hate coming to work every day. We didn't beat it out of them, as the same way. We didn't beat their enthusiasm out of them.
Yeah. And you bring up, I think, an important topic that we should be discussing, and I hope people are discussing in education today. That is, how can we reimagine education? Because you loved early childhood. I'll be honest with you. I was a principal in that space for 4 years. I loved the kids. I loved the hugs. I loved seeing the excitement. I loved seeing the habits that the teachers were forming in their classrooms and all of the optimism that comes with that kind of a building. But my heart is with middle schoolers. I love middle schoolers. I'm one of those weird people that love middle schoolers. But whether you're talking about an elementary or a middle school or a high school, we need to reimagine education so that we have that enthusiasm at every level, and that the teachers and the staff, they love coming to school too. But right now we're so burdened with mandates and with requirements and all of the things that people are carrying a heavy load. So what are your thoughts on that, reimagining education?
We spend a lot of time as educators worrying about things that we can't do anything about, right? So our state legislature is not necessarily what you'd call education friendly here in Texas. I don't know how it is in Illinois, but here it's not. Public education is under fire, like it is everywhere, but it's not just from people. I feel like our state legislators also don't, necessarily always have our best interests at heart, but we can't do anything about that. Exactly. I mean, we can, indirectly, we can vote, we can be politically active. I'm not saying that. We can hope for change, but in the day to day, we can focus on things that we can actually have influence over, which is, as a superintendent for you, as a school building administrator for me, was creating a space where that was not the daily narrative. The daily narrative wasn't, how our kids are performing on state tests. Yeah. Our daily narrative wasn't regulations and society and all those. It was, how do we create a space where the kids want to come? Because if the kids want to come, if the adults want to come, the kids want to come. If the kids want to come, their attendance is better, their performance is better. We start fulfilling the mission and we feel more accomplished, right? And so I feel like those are things that we actually have control over. And in my practice, I found that, well, look at that. Suddenly we do that. We focus on that. And our state rating was, the last state rating that I got as that principal was an A, right? We were an A school, but it wasn't because we spent all our time, worrying about each individual skill that kids had to learn. It was, we create a place where kids want to come and be, where parents are, excited to have their kids be, where teachers are happy to come and be. And suddenly kids start coming to school. They are more open to learning. And then we can get that job done. Because, of course, student performance is job one. I mean, it's not, there's no get, but student performance doesn't come from, in my opinion, and my practice, doesn't come from like beating it into kids. It comes from, bringing them to a place they want to be.
Yeah. And it goes back to that strengths-based perspective we talked about earlier. What we focus on is what we grow. And so when you focus on the positive, the strengths, the successes, and you're sure to celebrate those as a community, and you're building that community, you're going to have better outcomes.
Right. And you build capacity in adults, which then builds capacity in kids. And they start believing themselves that they can do it.
Yeah. And Stephen Covey has a quote talking about inspiring greatness in other people that they can't even yet see. But that's what our job is as leaders, is we have to inspire that greatness and help people reach their fullest potential so that our students can do the same.
Exactly. And, so one of the most gratifying things for me is I'm connected, still to a lot of educators that I worked with that worked for me, worked with me. And to see them be successful now, to see like I have of the assistant principals that I had, and I was a principal for a long time, almost 30 years of those, administrative years.
Mm-hmm.
And 100% of the assistant principals that I had that wanted to be principals became principals.
Yeah.
And so, like that, so many teachers who have moved into teacher leadership, whether they're still in the classroom and leading or whether they've moved into administration, those kinds of things, helping people see that, yes, you can do this. And yes, we need you to do this. That is probably, the legacy that I would want to, be proud of the most.
Oh, and you should be proud of that, because that's a huge testimony to your leadership, creating future leaders. So that's amazing. Now, as we talk about excellence, I can't talk about excellence in my acronym of HOPE without mentioning your most recent work, your book, Sustaining Excellence, How Culture Drives Teacher Retention. It was released in the fall of 24. So can you tell us a little bit, maybe even based off of your book, how do you sustain excellence?
And so a lot of what we've talked about is in this book. This book, what I love about this book is it germinated from notes, sticky notes, stories, all kinds of things that I had stuck in the back of notebooks and things like that I used, and just experiences that I had. And what a need that I see and that I saw, because I started writing this book a long time ago. The notes were from a really long time ago, but the book has been in a form since like 21 maybe ish. And so the need that I see and that I saw then was that leaders, especially new leaders, were being, I thought, mishandled in a way, mishandled in that they were led to believe that if they, did more tutoring after school, and if they did more, like beating down on teachers and that they were going to get results. And what my whole premise in the book is that you build and sustain excellence, because you don't want to just get excellent. You want to get there and then you want to sustain it, right? And you want to do that by developing a culture where people feel like they can. One chapter in the book is about, giving people appropriate autonomy, because people want to come work, and then you hire somebody to work, and then if you're over their shoulder telling them what to do the whole time, then they're not going to want to stay working there.
Right.
People need to have their gifts, their talents unwrapped. We just finished Christmas, right? We unwrapped a bunch of gifts, and people need their talents and their skills unwrapped, but then we also need to trust them to do the job that we chose them to do. And I had a superintendent one time who used to tell us that, he said, I'll help you all, you need, but if I'm going to do your job for you, then why do I need you? And, and it's the same with teachers. And I understand the feeling of control that some administrators have, that they, it scares them to let people be autonomous. But if you do that, what I've typically found is that is always a positive. Almost 100% of the time, people who do what they believe is right and are allowed to do what they believe is right will do a better job. And then they'll also stay, because the other premise of the book is we want to retain teachers, and especially now that's super difficult. The pool is just not to be numbers and quality, right, of the pool. And so we need to be able to get people in, get them trained, and then have them want to stay. So, just one example from the book is creating appropriate autonomy and nurturing that.
Yeah. And I think now the teachers, the principals, those pools have shrunk so much that we're all competing for the same candidates, and I think people are more mobile now than ever too. I mean, they're looking at different states, and especially if there's reciprocity, people are going from state to state. But we have to create school districts, school buildings, environments where people can lead no matter what their role, and they can thrive. And when that happens, then our student outcomes are going to be improved as well.
Yeah, and I can, cite that as something that really helped, because I was in a district that would be considered large in most places. We had 20 elementary schools in the district, 3 comprehensive high schools, and that's not even nearly the largest in the. We were one of the mid-sized districts around here, but people have a lot of options, just like you're saying. I stayed 25 of my 40 years in the district that I was in, and it was not near my house. I mean, I was a 45-minute to an hour commute, to work every day, but did it happily, because I loved where I was and people that I worked with. And I always said, the few times that I switched jobs, I was 13 years at a school. And then I switched my last 8. I was at Salinas, my last 8. And, you think everywhere I went, I was in a great situation. But a lot of that was because my attitude about it was, this is going to be a great situation. And then it turned out, guess what? When you think that it's going to be that way, it turns out to be that way. And so you're right. People don't spend 25 years anymore in one spot.
Right.
But also, people are not quick to leave unless you give them a reason to leave, unless you make it easy to leave. People move and you can't help that. But our school had the lowest for years. We had the lowest turnover rate, because people, even though they might have to travel far to get there, they knew that when they were there, they were going to be working in a great situation. And so if you can provide that really helps. People will leave if you make it, like I just said, if you make it easy to leave, they'll leave. And if you make it more difficult to leave, they may still leave, but they're going to find out that it's kind of better to stay. And it's definitely better for me as a leader to not have to train new people all the time and enculturate new people all the time.
Yes. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, Marty, but as a retired school leader, what would your leadership challenge be to those school leaders who are still in the game in regards to recruiting and retaining the best candidates to teach or to lead in your schools?
So that's a great question. And that's what I talk about most, mostly it's that. And what it is the challenge is to create a culture where people want to be and want to stay. And the way you do that is by hiring, the best that you can hire, but understanding that you may be given people, you may be assigned as a leader in a place where, people have already been, you don't get to pick a lot of the people that work with you. Right. And so you can't control that. I say hire well, but you may not have an opportunity to hire very many people over your time. And so what your challenge is to how do I make it where I want to come every day? Right. First off, right? How do I make this place the place that I want to come every day? And by doing that, how do I make this place that the teachers want to come every day? The paras want to come every day, the office staff, the cafeteria staff, the custodial staff. How do I make it where they want to come every day? And when we all adults do that, then how do we make it where the kids want to come every day, and where the parents want their kids to come every day, where they're safe, where they feel connected? One of my things was "You belong here." The 3 words "You belong here" that was on our school marquee. And we took those words to heart. It's like, this school is about, and this here's the place you want to be. And I was in a unique situation my last few years in that we had it in our district. Students could go to whatever school that they were zoned to school, but they could go to wherever, any school that they wanted, that the parents wanted to take them to. And also we allowed people from out of district to come and transfer in as well, pretty much with no restriction. And so how do you make your school the place that people choose to come, right? They don't just have to be there, they want to be there. And you do it by creating a culture where you take into consideration for the adults as the leader, there's going to be something here for you. If you are artistic, there's going to be something. If you're athletic, there's something. If you're academic, there's something. If we're going to consciously provide something that will meet the needs of just pretty much everybody, so that even if you don't so think about it for kids. If you don't love academics, we're going to hook you with art or athletics, that kind of thing. And then when you become, at Salinas, we were the Rangers. When you become a Ranger, you're in #Rangerland. When you become a Ranger, then you're going to be more open to the academic stuff because that there's something here for you. And same for the adults.
And that's powerful, that sense of community and that belonging. We all want that as human beings. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you, but I believe that building cultures, you're doing that through your habits, through your optimistic outlook, through passion, purpose, perseverance, and then also through excellence. So as we wrap up this episode, Marty, can you tell the listeners how they'll get in touch with you, where they're going to find your book if they want to purchase it, and if they want to get in contact with you, where do they need to go?
Absolutely. So the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You just can search my name, Martin Silverman, and you'll see the orange book. And you need to listeners need to have a copy of this. If they don't already, they need it. Because in the book, they're going to find, it's not a theory book. It's a book of practice. It's a book of do this, try this, and here's how it will go well, and here are some things that may not go well and what you can do about that. And it's also interspersed with stories from people who are in the schools working right now all over the country. I have people from South Carolina, New York, Illinois, even British Columbia, Canada, who wrote sections in the book, stories about how the topics in the book, played out for them personally. So it's an interesting read that way. And then if they want to get in contact with me, I have a website, mrsilverman.com. They can find me on social media. I don't use Twitter X that much anymore. I'm on there, but I don't use it that much. But Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they can connect with me, and I'll be happy to chat with them. Now that I'm retired, I need people to talk to. Right. So if people want to connect, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, as educators, we need that social connection, don't we?
Oh my gosh, that's been huge.
Yeah. Well, Marty, thank you for coming on the show today, and I wish you a very happy New Year. As we're recording this, we're getting ready to go into 2025. So happy New Year, and keep sustaining excellence.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for having me. I really appreciate it, and happy New Year to you as well.
All right. Thank you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.